Before the canal, sailing around South America took a lot of time, money, and sometimes lives. But in 1914, the Panama Canal, one of the most expensive and beautiful projects, officially opened. Since its opening, more than 1 million ships have passed through this route, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans by land and sea, making a dream of 500 years come true. Before the canal, sailing around South America took a lot of time, money, and sometimes lives. But in 1914, the Panama Canal, one of the most expensive and beautiful projects, officially opened. Since its opening, more than 1 million ships have passed through this route, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans by land and sea, making a dream of 500 years come true. Connecting the two seas is a huge boon for shipping, saving 20,000 kilometers in 2 weeks. With the canal, ships can travel from the Atlantic to the Pacific in 8 hours, 40 times faster than going around Cape Horn. Every year, about 14,000 ships pass through the Panama Canal, moving 172 million tons of cargo. The route brings in a significant amount of revenue for the Panamanian government, up to $2 billion a year in tolls. When the largest ships pass through the canal, the cost can be more than $500,000. It all started with a container ship. This ship departed from Israel 3 weeks ago, carrying containers to China. It sailed across the Atlantic and its destination was the Pacific. Back to the Americas. But thanks to the Panama Canal, it takes just 10 days to get from New York to Los Angeles, compared to 24 days via South America. The Panama Canal has been in operation for over 100 years and remains a mainstay of global trade. However, it faces major challenges. To reach the Pacific coast, ships must navigate a complex series of channels where captains must contend with the tightness of the channel and the size of the ship. The ship is larger than the Titanic, weighing 53,000 tons, and is a special class of ship known as a Panamax, the largest ship that can pass through the canal. Sailing in the extreme darkness is dangerous, so the ship has just 8 hours to pass through the canal. This process requires the support of large controls. The Panama Canal is the only place in the world where captains have to hand over command to someone else. Navigating a canal is a very stressful job, requiring a high level of precision. Small mistakes can lead to disaster. Canal pilots undergo 8 years of training. On a typical day, about 36 ships pass through the canal, transporting 450,000 tons of cargo. Shipments from the Atlantic must pass through 3 locks to be raised 26 meters into Gatun Lake. After passing through the lake, another set of locks lowers the ship to sea level and into the Pacific Ocean. The construction of the Panama Canal was the most impressive engineering feat of its time and remains one of the greatest in history. Construction began in 1880, but the French failed, causing 20,000 deaths among workers due to illness and harsh conditions. The U.S. then took over the project and introduced new methods, including moving large amounts of earth and flooding parts of the area with water, resulting in the creation of Gatun Lake, an artificial lake to help operate the canal. Ships enter the canal 11 kilometers. The boat enters the first lock. Each lock has 3 separate but connected locks. The Gatun Dam consists of 3 interconnected locks. One end of the canal in the Caribbean Sea, 26 meters above sea level, connects to Gatun Lake. The problem is that the Panama ship is over 300 meters long, while the length of the lock is only 320 meters. So there is hardly any redundancy. The problem is not only to control a ship, but also that the ship still weighs 66,000 tons. If the ship is damaged, it will not be able to continue the process. And if the lock is compromised, the Panama Canal will have to be closed. To make matters worse, the captain must control the ship from the helm, 220 meters away from the bow. Visibility is limited. It takes 30 minutes to lock the ship. Several tugs will help to move the ship into position. When the ship enters the first gate, the staff will drop 2.5 centimeters thick steel cables, trying to position the steering wheel in the stern. These steel cables are connected to the most powerful machines, each weighing 50 tons. These first machines can carry a ship 100 times heavier than themselves. Both engines will move the ship into position. Each engine can pull a 32-ton ship. It cost $2 million to build each of these servers. The captain was very worried because the width of the ship was 32 meters, while the width of the lock was only 33.5 meters. Each side was still less than 1 meter of space. This required high precision like engineering. Just a little carelessness could break the hull, leading to the canal having to close. During the transition, machines continuously adjusted the length of the steel cables, holding the ship in the middle of the lock. This action had to be perfectly synchronized to maintain the body's tension level. Once the ship was secured and safe, the gate would close, preventing the Caribbean Sea from flooding in. The lock gate was designed to be up to 2 meters to resist water pressure. After the gate closed, the operator would open the valve, allowing water from Gatun Lake to ride in through 100 gaps below. Lifting the ship up, the water flow had to be steady, otherwise it could send the ship into the wall. It took only 8 minutes for 80 million liters of water from Gatun Lake to change the lock, lifting the ship up 8 meters. Then the first tugboats come in next. This process is repeated until they reach the height of Gatun Lake, 26 meters above the Atlantic D. Then the ship drops the cable and continues automatically into Gatun Lake, completing the first stage of its journey through the canal. But it is now 1 p.m., with only 5 a.m. left to continue through the dangerous passages of the canal. Gatun Lake, with an area of 431 square kilometers, was once the largest artificial lake in the world, 3 times larger than Lake Como in Italy. About 40 ships pass through the canal every day, using about 7.5 billion liters of water. Gatun Lake was created by the construction of the Chagres Dam, a 27 million ton mass of rock and earth. The Chagres River is a crucial source of water for the canal, as every time a ship passes through the locks, the canal loses 200 million liters of water. Without replenishment, Gatun Lake would dry up and the canal would have to operate continuously. Fortunately, this lost water can be pumped from the Chagres River. After 5 hours, the ship reaches the end of Gatun Lake, only 30 kilometers to the Pacific Ocean, but the ship has to pass through the narrowest part of the canal, called the Culebra Cut. This is the largest construction part of the canal, with millions of tons of rock being blasted to carve a waterway in the mountains. A huge explosion occurs on the Gambuja embankment, creating a hole 18 meters wide. 6,000 workers were ready to use the dangerous facility to move rocks, building a 13-kilometer-long snake section. Water from Gatun Lake immediately poured in, creating a snake section. This was the first time the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans were connected. After 3 hours of tension, the ship separated from the snake section, but the pilot still could not relax. It was now 4 p.m. Only 2 a.m. left naturally. Next, it was necessary to guide the ship through Pedro Miguel and Miraflores under the direction of Captain Flores. These 2 sets of locks lower the ship to sea level, allowing it to pass through the last 5 kilometers of the canal. The way these locks open and close is exactly the same, but the process is reversed. When the ship enters the lock system, through a combination of gravity valves and gates, lower the ship to 26 meters, bring it back to sea level, and finally the Pacific Ocean. The ship's journey from the Atlantic to the Pacific takes only 8 hours, 14 days less than a century ago.